Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. Are you unnecessarily spending too much on your projects? In this episode, I'm going to take you through elements of refurbishments and conversions where I think some property investors and developers are actually spending too much money. And I'll explain to you how I take some slightly cheaper alternatives, which in my view don't undermine the end value of the property. So the key thing here, though, is you must know your market. You must know who your end client is going to be. That client could be a tenant, that could be a purchaser of a property, could well be a guest in a serviced accommodation property. And you need to know what they need as a minimum and ultimately what they don't need as a minimum. Because if you are providing things beyond what they need because they are nice to haves, then you are potentially spending more money on that project and delivering things that are just completely unnecessary at the end of the day. And I see and talk to property investors all of the time that I believe are regularly overspending on their projects. And I think some of this is because they're not listening to this podcast, perhaps for a start, but they're also following other property investors, and other properties investors have done something, so they've believed they've got to do the same. And that other property investor may well have done something because it's absolutely relevant for their market, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for all markets. And the obvious comparison here is that if we are working in the social housing sector, we definitely do not need to be providing everything that we would perhaps put in a top of the range holiday accommodation, serviced accommodation type property. They are two very different markets. But between those two markets, there's also lots of other micro markets. And, you know, we don't want to be over specifying to suit other markets that we might be working in that suit our local area, to suit our particular client type. So some things that I just wanted to talk through, and really I just very quickly put this list together. So there's probably other things beyond this, but just to sow the seed and give you some ideas of things that I see on a regular basis. The first one actually is a real bugbear of mine, and this is where I think lots of property investors spend far too much money, is hacking off and replastering old houses. Now, clearly, if the roof has fallen in and the plaster's falling off and the property's been empty for years, we need to be hacking off and replastering the lot. But I think there's a lot of property investors that are hacking back to brickwork properties that really don't need it. Either they don't need it because the existing plaster is not that bad, or it's not needed because their tenant demographic isn't going to be that discerning that a bit of poor rippled plaster is going to be a problem, or they're doing it because they're seeing other property investors do it. I think in some cases builders are perhaps suggesting it, but ultimately builders in some cases are just creating work for themselves. My view is that if the plaster is not falling off the wall, we can probably save large chunks of it. My view is I want the plaster that is visible on first impressions to be of a good standard. And I'm not saying Rolls-Royce perfect standard, I'm saying of a good standard. So where do tenants look when they first go into the property, where they first go into bedrooms in HMOs? If the wall above the fireplace is in bad condition, you probably want to consider replastering it. But if the wall down in the back corner around the back of the door is in bad condition, you probably can salvage that. Remember, if you're renting rooms out as HMOs, you're probably putting furniture in it. So the furniture, the wardrobe may well cover up that bad bit of plaster in the corner. The sofa may cover over things. So I tend to look at all of my rooms on a room by room basis and work out what do I need to deal with and what can be left. I've got an HMO. It's a sui generis HMO. It's got 11 bedrooms. So it is financed on a commercial basis. The finance is based on the yield. The yield is based on the value of each tenant. How much does each tenant pay in rent? Therefore, my 11 bedrooms, I've got those to a good standard where the rent is high, is a good rate for me. But the communal parts as well. The kitchen is actually kitchen living room is actually all brand new, so that's in good condition. But the entrance hall and staircase, I have not hacked off and replastered all of that. The plaster is a bit rippled, but it's a bit rippled because it's a 1920 something building and it's got all the original features up the staircase and it looks beautiful, and therefore the ripple plastering is almost part of that whole thing. Significantly, if I'd have hacked off and replastered that staircase, including scaffolding access, I could easily have spent £10,000 on that. And yet that £10,000 is not reflected back in the value of the property because the value of the property is based on the value of each bedroom. And the bedrooms I've got to a good standard. But very few of those, in fact, I'm not sure any of them were actually hacked back to brickwork. Some of them had significant repairs, but a lot of them have still got original plaster in them. So be careful hacking everything back to brickwork and redoing all of the plaster. Remember, if you take off all of your plaster, you've now got to take off all your radiators. You've got to remove all your electric switch plates. You're probably going to lose all of your skirting and all of your architrave around the door frames as well. So it's not just the cost of plastering, it's all those knock-on things that you could very easily be paying unnecessarily for. So that's the first thing to talk about. The second thing where I see property investors potentially overspending is they tile bathrooms floor to ceiling. Now, there's definitely a market where fully tiled bathrooms in nice quality tiles are absolutely needed. But at lower ends, HMOs, most of the time, in fact, all of the time, I would only ever tile inside the shower cubicle and create a splashback above the basin. In fact, a lot of the time now, I don't even tile, I use shower boards. But I don't believe that I need to fully tile ensuite HMO bathrooms. Just splashbacks just in the showers. If I wanted to lift the quality a little bit, so maybe if I was doing it in a family house to a good standard, or good standard flats and things like that, I would perhaps consider a half height tiled bathroom, so just up to the top of the splashback level, and then full height over the bath and all the shower as we've got, and then I would paint the remainder. So even painting's way cheaper than tiling, of course. It's way quicker than tiling. Tiling can very easily become a bottleneck on any project. And tenants, by and large, are not going to wreck that painting. And if they do, it costs nothing to, it's a negligible cost to repair it. And the saving you'll make by not fully tiling bathrooms is enormous. Sticking with bathrooms, I see investors tiling bathroom floors, porcelain tiles, ceramic tiles on bathroom floors. unless I'm doing absolutely top of the range. And by and large, most of those floors really want underfloor heating at that level. I put vinyl flooring in nearly everything I do. The top of the range vinyl flooring is nicer to walk on and can look just as nice as tiled, yeah, ceramic and porcelain tiled floors. So I wouldn't do those in. I don't think I would tile any investment properties unless I was right at the top of the market. I would consider tiling some properties for sale, but as I say, I would probably then consider underfloor heating in those as well. Consider, I wouldn't necessarily do that, but I'd consider that. Sticking also with bathrooms, I wouldn't spend money on glass shower screens or glass screens over the bath on a property that I was renting. So um, those glass shower screens are not super effective. I find that there's a lot of water spray bounces off the body and sprays out beyond and around them. So I think if I were refurbishing a bathroom for rental purposes, I would put up a rail and a shower curtain. Between tenants, you can replace the shower curtains; they're really cheap. Whereas the bath screens, not only are they expensive to put up, you've only got to have a tenant lean on them, and they won't work properly. They'll drag properly. They can still leak water underneath them if they're not positioned particularly well, and they can certainly leak water around them, and that could lead to other damage within the bathroom. So I wouldn't bother with a shower screen. If I was selling, I absolutely would consider it, and if I was right at the top of the range, I might consider it, but most of the time, I wouldn't bother. Going back to floors, I wouldn't spend money on expensive wooden and laminate floors at anything apart from top of the range. I would much rather go for a quality vinyl. A sheet vinyl is way cheaper. If a tenant or guest damages it, it can be taken up and relaid in half a day. Whereas if there's damage to wood or laminate floors, that can easily take 2 days to take up and replace. So it's much quicker, easier to do between tenants, between guests, if there is an issue. A lot of the good quality vinyl floors, you won't even know that they're not wood. You can crawl around on them, and they're hard sometimes to tell if they're wood or vinyl. Way cheaper, way quicker to put down, and way easier to switch over if they get damaged in use. So that would always be my stance there. And just talking about things like that, you go into some good quality restaurants, pubs, bars, offices, floors that look like they're tiled and wood are often not, particularly if you go into entrance lobbies where there's curved details that look like the wood but straight up to ceramic tile or something like that. A lot of those are actually high end vinyl floors, and they're far more versatile as a result. They're very hard wearing, but as I say, very easy to replace and patch in if they are damaged. Whereas wood is definitely not as easy. Be careful that you don't overspend in kitchens. Kitchen suppliers are more aligned to selling things to the public. The public will fall in love with their kitchen and potentially spend more on some things that you might want in your own house, in your own kitchen, your own house, but you may not want in a rental property. So be very careful not being upsold things like counter lighting, helmets and cornices. Helmets and cornices mid-range upwards all of the time. Maybe not cornices, they're perhaps a little bit out of style in some properties, but you can get square cornices. Cornices go on the top of cupboards, helmets on the bottom. Mid-range and upwards, certainly do it. Bottom rate of the range, entry level, I wouldn't worry with those at all. Um, End panels on cupboards, again, mid-range upwards all of the time. entry level, probably not always relevant. So just be careful that you're not spending too much there. You definitely want to be avoiding smart carousel corner units and things like that. They are really expensive and you just won't get the value out of them. Possibly consider them high end if you're selling, but I wouldn't bother any other time with those. So yeah, there are lots of little things that the kitchen suppliers will add in. I used to say don't bother with cutlery tray inserts. If I'm selling, I probably wouldn't worry too much about cutlery tray inserts, but they're a nothing cost at the end of the day. If I'm renting, I will get those because I want, I obviously want tenants to have some quality. So that's something where I've changed my view. That I think the price of those has come down massively, actually. There was a time where they were quite expensive and they've dropped in price, so they're worth considering. But be careful, go through your quotes in detail and just make sure you're not being sold something that you don't need for your market. I see a lot of property investors putting in recessed spotlights. They can be quite expensive. They can be unnecessary, again, at the lower end of the market. A lot of my low end properties, I'll put a single circular plate with 3 spotlights on it or 4 spotlights. Sometimes I'll get a spotlight bar with 4 or 5 lights on it. I'll angle those lights around the kitchen or sometimes around the bathroom if I do it in the bathroom as well. And rather than doing recessed spotlights, way cheaper, only one electric point for the electrician to wire up, and can be just as effective. And most people are not judging the quality of the property by looking at the ceiling and deciding whether the recessed spotlights would add more value. Nice spotlights on a bar will add just the same amount of value, really. And because you might be able to angle them a little bit better, could even be better than spotlights recessed into the ceilings. Talking of spotlights in bathrooms, I would avoid integrated spotlights and extractor fans. They're expensive. They're expensive to put in. They're expensive to replace if they break. And the fans frequently are not as effective as the ones that go straight through the wall. So I would avoid those. Sticking with electric items, I would also be very careful about metal face plates, particularly take an HMO bedroom. By the time you've put furniture into an HMO bedroom, you might find the only faceplate you can actually see is the light switch. Even if you're staging properties to sell and you're putting furniture in, again, you might only see light switches. I worked with a developer a while ago. Their policy was always plastic at low level and metal at high level. So go for metal light switches because they're visible, but don't worry at low level. I've not got any metal plates in any of my I don't think I've got any in any of my properties. I've always refurbished with quality white. I've never gone for the chunky looking square white ones. I've always gone for the curved ones, but they're not a lot cheaper. They are cheaper than the metal ones. They're not maybe £1, £1.50 each item, but multiply that up across a whole property, and there's a good saving there, which is all just cash in your pocket, really. And that's the thing with all of these things on their own. None of them really are big chunks of money, but across a whole property, you could find that you are massively overspending. I'm just going to finish this with a little case study. I worked for a client a number of years ago now. She was building up a portfolio in Tunbridge Wells in Kent. Now, those of you that know Tunbridge Wells will know that predominantly it's a pretty affluent town. It's quite a smart town. And I'm sure you've got your own ideas of the market in Tunbridge Wells. However, this particular client had stumbled across a strategy, a social housing strategy. She stumbled across an estate that was on the periphery of the town where there were fairly budget type properties. They'd been built to a budget, and the whole the kind of area it was. And she'd established that she could buy properties in this particular estate, refurbish them, and rent them out to a social housing provider. The key thing was that her demographic, her clients, the tenants that were going to move in to these properties were the next stage up from living on the streets. So one week they were living on the streets in a box. The following week they were living in properties as tenants of the charity she was working with. As a result, they did not need anything more than 4 walls, a roof, heating, and running water. That was luxury to them. And when I was managing projects for her and refurbishments for her, we had to be very, very careful that we didn't over-specify. I had to pull builders back who wanted to do more improvements. She did not mind if door handles didn't match across the property. As long as each door had a door handle on, she didn't mind. She didn't mind if the doors didn't match. There was one property where we relocated a wall to make the kitchen living area bigger so that she could get an additional bedroom from the other side. She didn't even want me to paint the remaining 3 walls in the bedroom. She just said to me, find the paint that's closest and paint the wall that you've got the builder to build. So that is absolutely a classic example of understanding your market. And I'm not to say that everything I've spoken about in this episode is angled at every person and that every investor is overspending. That's not the case at all. What I want to just get over is that you need to know your own market. You need to make sure that you're delivering what that market wants and potentially nothing more. Be very careful following what other investors are doing because they've got different markets to you, and some of them don't even know what they're doing. Learn what adds value for you, learn what adds value for your market. Do that, make that your style, make that your niche, make that your profile, what you get known for, and be really, really good at it. But be very, very careful that you're not overspending on some of the things that I've talked about in this episode. And ultimately, all of these little things might only be small amounts of money. I'm sure you would rather keep that money in your wallet than pay it out unnecessary to other people. So thanks very much for joining me, and I'll see you and speak to you on another episode very soon.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share, and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.